I haven't had a whole lot of time to reflect. Obviously, we were hopeful that we would finish the season on a, I'm going to say more positive, but more upbeat note. That said, I think there's a lot of things for us to look at this year and feel good about. And there's also things for us to look at this year and try to address and use to improve. So I don't want to get into too detailed an analysis just off the cuff, but obviously we'll have a chance to answer more pointed questions. But this was a team that was a joy to coach. And from that standpoint, for me personally, just have a ton of respect for these players and what they were able to accomplish as a group, and a lot of the growth that we saw individually as well.
I'd start by thanking ownership, our staff, our players, the media, you guys. I think we're sitting here today. Quinn and I were talking a little bit this morning. Every season is quite unique. It's a little bit like having several children, and they all come from the same spot. And in basketball terms, it's all basketball, but this season was quite unique. It's hard to say that we're disappointed when your point differential's better, your record's better. To a man, all of our players improved individually. We moved from 12th in defensive efficiency to 7th, which is for a young group that has tools is quite notable. We're still middle of the pack offensively, but I do think we made progress. But to a person, I should say, on the plane last night home, there wasn't one person that's not upset that we're not playing in the second season. I think that was a reasonable expectation for a lot of different reasons. That didn't happen. We're not going to sit here and alibi, and when we ask your questions, every professional sports team has injuries, and ultimately I'm most responsible up here on the dais, not Quinn, not the coaches, not the players, relative to roster construction. And I think some of the criticism that's out there has been fair relative to maybe our payroll being low or our team being young, us not addressing a couple of issues at the trade deadline. And so I welcome all those questions. I'm eager to jump, like Quinn said, into analysis. It's a little quick to digest, but we'll do as good a job as possible answering those questions as best we can. So fire away.
We'll open up the questions. Justin, Stephanie, start with Andy there, please.
Thank you.
Apologies for the tough question right out of the gate. You guys, as you know, the clutch situation this season, having poor record in close games. What do you think is the cause of that? How do you look at fixing that next year, and how much of that is top of mind for you guys next season?
I'll start, and then I'll let Quinn have a piece of it if he wants, Andy. One, I'm not surprised at the question, and two, I'm not surprised who it comes from. So that's a credit. I'm not taking a shot at you. Part of the answer won't be maybe what most of you expect in the room. When you're rebuilding, when you're average to below average, our record says we're below average. The point differential that the team had this year using Pythagorean theorem says we're a 46-win team. That may be a better measure as you're starting to look forward. So the quality of the team isn't indicative of your ability to close close games. It's a zero-sum game. So multi-season, when you play a bunch of close games, more than likely you're going to add that up and it's going to be zero. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. The a better indicator of a championship caliber team, which clearly we're not. We're playoff competitive. We just missed. But a championship competitive team is your ability to blow out teams and not play those close games. And obviously the greatest example of that right now is the Golden State Warriors, and all of us aspire to be that. And you have to have some unique talent that develops and takes its lumps. But so Quinn, the coaches, top thing on their board this offseason, and it really started with our conversations with the players, going through open gym to training camp to literally an everyday process of sideline out of bounds, baseline out of bounds, up to down to what we call 2-minute games, so things that happen. We worked on it. And while we probably, from a record standpoint, can't show tangible statistical growth, the eye test on what we saw, there was progression, but certainly it's something that we have to 100% own and get better at to move our group forward. And I was with a coach in Houston, and Rudy Tomjanovich, that was quite unique in his mindset towards close games and elimination games and pressure games. And Quinn has had very similar thoughts. I know internally we're talking about, thinking about, and working on those issues. And frankly, I'm very confident that we'll resolve those. But hopefully that we'll resolve them, that we'll play, we'll be on the right side of the ledger and blow out games, to answer your question. Andy, thanks.
Dennis alluded to some of the things that, yes, Dennis alluded to a few of the things that we've tried to do to work on those situations. Literally going through. You mentioned the 2-minute drills. We have a thing we call special teams, where we're literally trying to script out situations that we'll find ourselves in, and we're doing that primarily to try to generate experience or generate expert. That said, we'll continue to do that. I feel like we're trying to hold ourselves to a high bar in a practice setting. Ultimately, having to go through, those situations in a game, that's how you do gain the experience. And as Dennis said, we'll go back, we'll go back and look at every game and see where we can be better. The one area where I feel like there can be a marked improvement is on the defensive end. If you look at, where we were defensively during the course of a game and what happened to us defensively late in the game, we weren't very good, is what it comes down to. And so, how do you adjust that? How do you correct that? I think the way the game is played at the end of the game is different. It's a lot more physical. We're a team that has to learn how to adjust to that. There's screens that sometimes aren't legal in the first quarter that become more legal in the fourth quarter. It's a little bit, we've talked about like a nickel defense, things that hopefully can help our players understand that the game has shifted, that there's a point in the game where it is unique, and for us to raise our concentration, our physicality, and our competitiveness to respond to that. And I don't think we're able to do that, certainly on the level that we liked, and as a result, the results, reflect that. So it is something that we're aware of. As a coach, in spite of whatever you say and how you analyze it, that's something you can't help but internalize as a coach. That's where it goes. So I'm certain that we'll continue. It was a big emphasis last year, actually. We've got to be able to close games better on both ends of the floor. I think Dennis does make a good point. I felt like, regarding the blowouts, I felt like there were a lot of times, our team didn't get blown out much either. So there were some games around however we measure, what is a close game, what's not. I think there were some times that we really hung in there and the game became close, although it wasn't as close as maybe the score indicated at that time. There were other games that were last possession games. And the biggest thing I saw, I think we got good shots. We had a lot of clean looks. The Dallas game is an example. I'd like to think with more experience we'll be more comfortable in those situations. But the biggest thing, if you look, and again, we'll look at all of them and try to process it and analyze it to be better. That's really all we can do. But one of the biggest things, we didn't defensive rebound down the stretch. And anytime you give a team multiple opportunities, it's going to get you. And the other thing is there was a number of times we didn't shoot free throws well. So, I'd have to look at the numbers, but our free throw percentage during the course of the game, there were some times where it was significantly below what it was. And I hope those things will even out as we get more comfortable, and we'll get more defensive rebounds. We'll raise our focus and our concentration to the level of the game, and we'll be more efficient offensively, whether it's free throws or late game situations. And that said, obviously it's something I can assure you that we're really working on and trying to work on it almost in the way that a football team would work on it, like in a 2-minute drill situation. I think that's the most effective way to approach it. And Dennis referenced that with 2-minute games. You have to create those situations, and unfortunately a lot of them were created this year, not in practice but in the game, and we didn't finish as many of them as we wanted.
You said you were not disappointed, but you said everyone was upset. So is there a word that captures where you are right now, and does that lead to a little urgency to maybe be less process-oriented, be more results-oriented, push the chips to the middle of the table a little bit, as you've said before?
Yeah, fair question. If it's fundamental, David, I think we're certainly going to explore every option relative to the draft. We have a number of picks, and we may not select them all right. We may use them to get another veteran if the analysis says that we need to do that, in our opinion, and that opportunity arises. But that has to be fundamental. Very comfortable, with that said, with the number of returning players, the core that we have, the internal improvement that's taken place, that in addition to some, I think, reasonable projections. So, but look, we're not going to arbitrarily try to speed up the timeline or slow it down to be process-oriented. I know there's a buzzword and skipping steps, but there's probably not a word. It's more of a paragraph or a short story relative to this season being quite unique. It's been 19, 20 years for me now, and every season is quite unique. This one was a little more disjointed, and again, we're not going to get into all the specifics relative to the injuries and the timing of the injuries and the coupling of Rudy and Derek going out, but where we have to be really good, in my opinion, David, is get away from rationalization, that it's just human nature to do that and go in self-protection mode and get into like what's real. And one of the worst things that we could do, frankly, is to overreact. And luckily we have good mentors and LHM Corporation, good ownership. Greg pulled me aside, not long after he hired me and said, "Hey, look, we're operators, we're not traders." And I think historically the Jazz have been very true to the Miller's family's values. And so, but with that said, there won't be anything that won't be examined, and if it's quicker and more experience, then that may be the right thing to do, or as we continue to slow growth it as well and hope and work towards better health and continuity, that may provide us the solution as well.
Dennis, does this team still feel like it's in what you would call a rebuild? And if so, is there a point of diminishing returns with that process?
There could be, sure. There's always risks and threats relative to something that becomes too prolonged. I think we're fundamentally, and if you look at the metrics, we're towards the tail end of that. We're a competitive team. A few things have happened. I have to own that. If there's one criticism I think you could make that's fair is we erred towards chemistry, continuity, continued development because we felt like the players and in particular the coaching staff showed great progress. But the opportunity cost of that is was there a veteran that could have helped us stabilize? I think we did fairly well with Shelvin at the trade deadline, but there were two particular deals that were actually proposed to us, and we said yes to, and for whatever reason, we weren't able to consummate that. We were more short-term oriented. I was willing to give up a first-round pick, multiple picks, very significant salary slot, because we had built that into the equation, and for whatever reason, we weren't able to consummate, and I've got to go through all those postmortems and see if there was something else that we could have done that would have allowed us to augment the team where we knew it needed to be augmented.
This is for both you gentlemen. The issue of Dante being injured all year has come up a number of times. How different is he now after a year of watching than he was a year ago? And then the second part of the question is, where do you see him a year from now?
I'll let Coach, and then I'll pick up the second part, Brett. Thank you.
You want me to answer the first part and the second part, or just okay? I think it's really kind of, I think my answer will probably combine the two of them. I think the year, it's difficult, to have the development that you would hope for, that he would have with the competition. I got really excited when I saw him here in Summer League. He had only one game, but there were some things that he did. Notably, he played really bad the first quarter, and there was a kind of a poise and a steadiness, and all of a sudden he started playing better. What I felt like during the year, it was tough for him to overcome, a game where he played poorly at the beginning, and I thought that was a real sign of maturity. He didn't have an opportunity to continue to develop in that fashion because I think the only way you can do that is through competition. The other thing he was able to do, and to try to take advantage of the fact that you're not playing, really was shooting. And I'm not, it's not like he's suddenly become, this dead-eye three-point shooter, but I do think he's improved. And even that, what I'm trying to say is he's working on the mechanics of a shot. I think it's been an emphasis. But that's not exact. It's not fair to all of a sudden evaluate and say, hey, Dante's going to come back as a quote-unquote shooter. I think what you will see Dante coming back as is a player that's determined. And he's having to overcome a lack of opportunity to gain experience, and he's having to overcome a physical issue. And I think the process that he's having to go through, I believe, will make him better and make him tougher mentally and make him more consistent. How quickly that happens, I think varies from player to player. But I do feel he's on the right track, and to the extent that you can take advantage of something like this, and there is a quote-unquote silver lining, I think he's looking for that. So the shooting is like one of the only things you could do because he's not able to move, and I think he really threw himself into that. So I use that mainly as an example of his work ethic as much as anything.
I would just add, Brett, that Quinn had a great quote in describing Dante last year, and I think it's appropriate in a slightly different vein. this year. When he's on the court, his size at 6'6", with a 6'10" wingspan and very good lateral movement, it's hard to measure. You can't really know how big and long he is as a defender at the point of entry. It's the first point of contact when the offense is moving, and that's hard for our opponents to measure. And I think it's safe to say it's weird, and it gets back to my point with David and describing the season. We go from 12th defensively to 7th, right? So above average to good, and yet we missed a big component. And so there's an open question, I believe, and you guys will, I'm sure, write about it and talk about it and analyze and in many ways criticize, and it's appropriate, that can we move from good, be the 7th best defensive team in the league, to unique and special, where San Antonio was this year in their size, but not only their size, but their discipline, and then it relating to the overall metrics of they weren't just first in the league defensively, they were a lot better. We saw that the last 29, 30 games of last season. So the other narrative, I think, what Dante Quin touched on, we saw a few things in his individual improvement last spring that carried over to Utah Jazz training camp for Summer League, and then to the one game. So it's hard to miss something that you didn't have, but we did feel like there was pretty good indications that he was going to move forward offensively. So with that said, our point guards, all three of them, improved this year, and we have 4 under contract, and it provides a unique opportunity from a development standpoint and a continuity standpoint as well. But it goes without saying that we very much look forward to Dante's return to health. Quinn noted the improved shooting. I think he's quite anxious, as are we, to move forward from this past off season.
Next question, Rod.
Hey, Rob.
Dennis, you mentioned at the beginning, and Quinn, you may want to jump in on this too, that there's been fair criticism. So in your mind, what is the most fair criticism, and what do you have to do to address that situation, and how quickly do you have to do it to not just become playoff competitive?
Yeah. I think we're in alignment, right? Quinn may verbalize a few things or prioritize things a little bit different than I, but if you took let's just say there's 7 or 8 issues, I think we'd be unanimous. We'd put those in maybe a different order. For me, it would be ball security, our turnover percentage. I think we're in the bottom 5. A shot is better than no shot. I believe that to be true. I think our ball security also led to playing on the defensive end in transition and cross matches. So I do believe that we'll move forward. But in a weird way, you can talk about strategy or player strengths or weaknesses. And I think as I had that question relative to ball security, Rod, instead of looking out the window at others, I had to keep looking at the mirror at me. And so, because we've placed a team with Quinn and the coaches that said, hey, develop, be patient. And they're doing that. I mean, just across the board. We can't point to one guy that hasn't improved, and in some cases, extreme improvement, most notably this year with Trey Lyles' in-game improvement. And I've used this before, I think, on my radio show. So we have Rudy up top handling the ball a lot. And at times his turnover percentage is high. But yet he's getting a lot of opportunity with the ball, which Rudy wants. He wants to grow, in which Quinn allows that to happen. So there's that that fine line between experimentation, so allows for growth, but yet reducing maybe a trouble area with ball security. And where's that line at? I think we're going to have to delve into those particular situations and look at the development versus just overall improvement. But generally speaking, I think we're on the right track. But, some of those criticisms and narratives, to be frank, are fair.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I can skip over the turnover question. Dennis articulated it very, very much like I would, in that basically there's some individual components to that where you have to get guys that get better handling the ball. Hopefully that continues to occur. And then collectively, just the purpose with which we play, whether it's, one of the most frustrating situations where we turn the ball over is in transition, because those turnovers oftentimes directly result in the other team scoring. I think we need an enhanced focus on that. Some of that, in my mind, comes from even leadership on the court. That would be the other thing that I would point to, that, and it's not a criticism of our current group as much as it is the recognition that there's a possibility for growth in that regard. There's some teams that just have this kind of alpha, leader, like Chris Paul maybe being the best example. And there's other teams where that either evolves or it's shared. And you can kind of point to Golden State as an interesting example, where Steph Curry's clearly their best player, but there's an argument to be made on some level that Draymond Green, in many instances, provides a type of leadership that's unique. And I think for our group, we have to continue to try to cultivate that, recognize it, and demand it. And when I say demand it on the court, that's an important place. And I think that runs through a lot of that thin red line goes through turnovers, it goes through some late game situations, it goes through defensive focus that I spoke about before. And I would circle all the way back to the growth process, and that some of that can only come through experience. And some of it we just have to continue to be honest with ourselves and be aware of, and try to work on it as best we can. With as far as the turnovers go, I don't think we could have, I'll think about it again. We've put so much emphasis on that. I mean, when I worked in Philly with Doug Collins, we led the league in turnover differential, and we actually, we brought him in preseason to talk about it. We had a drill called the Battle of the Ball, where some, like, not just collegiate but high school stuff, where we're working to emphasize it. And I think our players understand it. It's not something that there's, in my mind, we're not careless. We just have to be better. And so certainly that is a situation that impacts not only our offense but our defense.
In the spirit of the schedule, I've got 5 questions in the queue. We're going to start with Kurt right here.
Dennis, regarding the Olympics, will you can encourage all of your guys to pursue their national teams or discourage anyone?
That may be as tough a question as we've had. Look, we have rules, NBA to FIBA, that we have to abide by. I guess from 20,000 feet, Mark Cuban's made points relative to international play that I think is fair. We've made some thoughts, initiatives when I was in San Antonio to make that process better, as far as number of practices, injury reporting, compliance of players, and communication. And there's been a carryover. So I do think it's better, but no question there's a risk. And so what we'll have to do is sit down with each player individually and talk about where they're at. I don't know where Dante will be in June. His checkups have been very positive. with Dr. Elatraj and our medical people, University of Utah Healthcare, and with Brian and Mark. And we anticipate that he'll start taking contact in early June. Australian national team starts getting together and submitting rosters early July, so how all that fits is an open question. Certainly there's Rudy. It's a much different conversation. That one's right now more related to fatigue and need for active rest and strength development, and can that take place when you play so many games? We'll certainly share those concerns. Raul with the Brazilian national team is a national team player as well. Joe Ingles, Australian national team. Joe sat out last year. He needed some active rest, and we think he moved forward because of that. He wasn't as tired on back-to-backs, and he got stronger as the season went on, or maybe didn't detrain as much as more appropriate. Gordon, the 25-man team. So it's a very complicated question because I've been a direct beneficiary. I'm not sitting up here on this dais without the international player, Hakeem Olajuwon, Dikembe Mutombo, Yao Ming, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, Tiago Splitter, all of our internationals. And there's a balance of competition and can that competition and heightened environments in world championships and Olympics help our cause? You can make an argument, but there's also a risk associated with it. So it's not all good, all bad. I don't want to sit up here and be a hypocrite, but clearly last year our program suffered because of Dante's injury. And it's a weird dynamic. Justin and I went to see Rudy and Tibor play last summer, and you want them to play well and you want the team to win, but yet you want them to get off the court as quick as possible so nothing happens. And that's kind of a weird emotion to have relative to your players. But yeah, we'll individually analyze and talk to and hopefully come up with, and as much as we pray for good luck in the lottery or a trade coming up, that you're able to do something during the draft and move up. Just as many times I pray to avoid bad luck. And so hopefully those will be answered going forward.
Dennis, just given how the season played out, do you see a future here for Trey Burke, or what? I mean, how do you kind of address his situation going forward?
Yeah, we'll visit with Trey individually. There's no question he improved. I think Igor and Trey did some really unique work. Igor was able to bring some things to the program from a development standpoint that were not only quite fundamental, but really unique. So I think you saw all of our players improve, but Howell and Trey improved as well. He's under contract. Clearly he wants to play and have a larger role, so he's been the utmost professional. I'm actually really proud of how he's handled this situation to date, and we're not a malicious group. It's just not in our DNA. Quinn and the staff treated him well. Quinn even noted to me 2 days ago that this process is going to allow him to move forward, and I truly believe that. And we'll see if that's here or somewhere else, but certainly we want to visit with him, and we'll keep the nature of that conversation quite private.
Jody?
Ultimately, a success is defined by wins or losses in sports. Looking at where you're coming from, 25 wins, 38 wins, 40 wins, how big, for both of you, how big of an emphasis will be on actually making the playoffs next year?
One of the things that happened this year was there was a point, really with 18 games left, where we found ourselves in a position where we had gotten Derek and Rudy back. Alec was still out, but we had been making progress. I felt like we were playing well, even though at the time this happened, we we lost at Golden State. And we met as a coaching staff, and actually Igor brought this up, and it was really discussed, and I agreed. And what we wanted to do was, really we went from a period of let's improve, let's get better, let's grow. And then we got to a situation where it kind of morphed into let's play well. And something like the point differential, it doesn't always add up to wins, but you get a feel for when you're playing well that hopefully the wins will follow. And then I felt it was really healthy for our team to challenge ourselves, particularly that last stretch, because I felt like we had made enough progress where we could compete realistically. And we set that goal, like let's talk about winning. The other things were still there underlined, because I think that they contribute to winning, certainly. But going through that and really making a concerted effort in our minds to identify that as a short-term goal, really, in this particular season, I felt like regardless of whether we achieved it, that was going to really help us. And so I don't know that next year in some ways is that different, where there's I would, if we could make the playoffs, I'd like to be the 5th seed instead of the 8th seed. You want to be as good as your team can potentially be. And I think for us, part of doing that, is approaching some of those situations with that mentality. And I think that connects to some of the end-of-game situations too, where you want to just not be able to generate a good shot. You want to make a shot. You want to not just be able to have a great contest on a shot. You want to bother it enough where it doesn't go in. You don't want to just have position on a rebound. You want to get the rebound. But that said, I just don't completely on a personal level buy into just a results-only focus. I just think I don't think in the long term it gets you necessarily the results that you want. I think it's counterintuitive. I do believe that we want to maximize what we have, and as we continue to look at where our team is through the summer, certainly we thought we had a different team last year at this time than it turned out we did with Dante's injury. So there's all kinds of variables involved. Suffice to say, if that can be something we do, that's what we want. But I don't want to set it up as a be-all, end-all. That suddenly if we don't do that, we're no good and we're failing. And because other teams are going to be better. But clearly, I can say that without de-emphasizing the fact that it's something we want to do. Clearly, and feel like we're growing in that direction, and hopefully it'll be an opportunity that we'll have soon. I thought, frankly, it was going to be something we got to do this year, and it didn't work out.
The last question, Dave Green.
Oh boy, pressure's on. I hate to belabor the injury point, but when your projected starting 5, misses over 170 games, how do you fairly evaluate what you have when you've seen him on the court so infrequently this year when it comes to making evaluations? And then also, can you just address Trevor Booker and the desire to maybe bring him back?
Sure. Dana, it is nuanced. There's certainly how coach feels will be most important to me, and ownership. That opinion is always driven the direction of the Jazz, and I don't want to speak for Gail, but she's told me enough that it always will, and so I agree with that. Then you start looking at video of when the guys were together, what our defense looks like just with Rudy and Derek, and maybe even some video analysis last year of Rudy and Derek and Dante in particular, at providing some structure, not to diminish Gordon's an excellent defender as well. So it's our analytics department as well. They're quite gifted and giving us data that they think we need to look at, shot charts, five-man lineups that you can parse out, 2- and 3-man combinations, strength of opponents, all the metrics. And I think that's where we need to be really careful, though, because I don't want to move into rationalization and have the numbers tell us what we want them to tell us rather than what's actually real. I think rationalization can lead to lack of ideas and creativity, and so when we get together, we're going to encourage argument, healthy argument, and devil's advocate point of view. And to David's point, we need to speed it up by using our $28 million in Rome roughly to go get some veterans. And I can't say that will be the result, but certainly it needs to be talked about and argued out. And I'm very confident, frankly, that in the foundation and in Coach and his staff's expertise that we'll come up with the right solutions. Oh, Booker. So, boy, there's so many great things. One, and we'll say this in private here in a little bit, but we want to thank him for his leadership, his energy. I think one thing that was lost on Trevor, and it's one of the reasons why we moved from 12th to 7th, is he was excellent defensively. From his mobility, his edge, his toughness. And I think the second year in the program, we had this in San Antonio a little bit where the first year some of our new acquisitions, especially free agents, just weren't quite comfortable. It's quite unique, and our system, we're trying to get to that point as well. And so I think Trevor, while he might have struggled a little bit offensively early with some of his finishes, he always was really good defensively and improved to a large measure. And that hasn't gone unnoticed, all those intangible characteristics, but the tangible of what he brings on the court. And we look forward to having a conversation with him. He'll have great options. He's a guy that quite a few teams inquired about, and usually when that happens, Dana, that means that they're going to have a good market, and so we anticipate that being the case. And we have to get through a draft, and the draft's a de facto trade season as well, and so and then the early part of free agency. But what we want to do, whether it's here or somewhere else, is help him. I've always said I could see Trevor moving into coaching or management someday, and I think that speaks to the quality of character, his intelligence, and so we're quite proud of him.